The Bible is so huge, even our disagreements with the Bible come from the Bible. We've been looking at 5 different accusations that people in the West often make of the Bible. Here is the 5th accusation, that it's pro-slavery. There are Old Testament laws concerning bondservants in Israel. That strikes us as, at the very least, troubling because of how we view slavery in the West. But why do we view slavery the way that we do? Plato and Aristotle taught that some people were born to be slaves. Muhammad was not just pro-slavery, he held slaves. But we think of slavery as obviously wrong. Why? Well, it is from the gospel of Christ, from the example of Christ, and from the teaching of the New Testament, which produced an incredible ripple effect that eventually led to the overturning of slavery. Historian Tom Holland puts it like this.
But compacted into this very, very small amount of writing was almost everything that explains the modern world.
Well, the Western world, as we take for granted. Yes,
but also the way that the West has then moved on to shape, concepts like international law, for instance. So the concepts of human rights, all these kind of things, ultimately, they don't go back to Greek philosophers. They don't go back to Roman imperialism. They go back to Paul.
Some of the humanists
Paul really
and atheists,
his letters, I think, are, along with the 4 Gospels, the most influential, the most impactful, the most revolutionary writings that have emerged from the ancient world. I mean, if we're talking of Paul, I think of him as a kind of depth charge, deep beneath the foundations of the classical world. And it's not anything that you particularly notice if you're in Corinth or Alexandria. And then you start feeling this kind of rippling outwards. And by the time you get to the 11th century in Latin Christendom, everything has changed, and you have this. I think essentially what Paul's significance is that he sets up ripple effects of revolution throughout Western history. So the 11th century, with the Papal Revolution, essentially it establishes this idea that society has to be reborn, reconfigured, that vested interests have to be torn down. And then the Reformation, what we call the Reformation, is a further ripple effect of that, and the Enlightenment is a further ripple effect of that. And very interesting. It spilled out so much that now in the 21st century we don't even realise where these ripple effects are coming from. We just take them for granted.
If you have a problem with slavery, it is the Bible that has given it to you. And you might ask, why were there bondservants in the Old Testament at all? Well, that's a longer conversation, but it's a conversation where hopefully you'll see that the Bible is bigger than you'd ever imagined. In the words of Jordan Peterson, it is a developmental document. But deeper than that, the Bible is a document that has developed us to the point where we can look at the Old Testament and say, oh, hang on, what's going on there? But that question only occurs to us because of the Bible. The Bible is so huge, even when we're critiquing the Bible, we're standing on the Bible.
You might feel that we've outgrown the Bible. Actually, we've grown out of the Bible's worldview. Our world has been built by this book. You may have all sorts of objections to this book. You might have all sorts of questions about this book. But will you question your questions? Will you ask where they've come from? And will you look again, or even for the first time, to the Bible? Okay, you might say, but if the Bible is so immense, where do I begin? Well, if you wanted to dive in, you could always click on this video series that will give you a basic orientation to the Bible in daily 5-minute chunks. But also, stay tuned to this series because in next week's video, we'll give you a tangible way in. Next time, we discuss the Gospels and why we can trust them. They're thorny, 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 thorny. So thorny, they're thorny.